Good morning everyone, and welcome to the webinar on how to eliminate the noise from your presentation. My name's Peter Dew and I'm a public speaking presentation skills trainer and coach, and I specialise in helping people have more impact, more effectiveness, more confidence in their presentation skills. This topic, eliminating the noise. What do I mean by noise? Let me begin by saying noise is anything that distracts from your presentation, takes away from your core message. Anything that distracts the audience, that occupies them, that's not central to your message. So noise is just not the sound, the background sound or clicking noises. Noise is both visual and auditory and any other sensory that occupies people. So how to get the most out of webinars? Ask questions as we go. I'm quite happy to answer any questions. There's no silly questions. If you have a question that I can't answer, I will find out and get back to you. Take notes and bear in mind that you can have a copy of this webinar recording. So if I speak too fast or I skip over something and you want to know more about it, you can review the recording. Participate, add your comments, ask questions, and most importantly, think and apply the knowledge I'm sharing with you to your own personal situation. Best way to do that is cast your mind back to a presentation you've delivered or maybe participated in. What did you notice that was maybe distracting or noisy? Think forward to something you're planning and what can you do to eliminate, to reduce some of the noise in your future workshop. I'll run through the content fairly quickly, so don't wait for me to stop and say, are there any questions? Just write in the dialog box at any time. Let's get started. The agenda. I've got 6 strategies for reducing noise. The first one is around noisy gestures. The second one is around how you use the platform, cleanly, purposefully, or noisy use of the platform. I'm going to talk about noisy words that don't mean anything. Those words that people will hear and wonder, what's the meaning of that word? And those words or those sounds that you utter that just annoy people. PowerPoint slides can be really noisy. Some of your non-verbal communication with your hands can be really noisy, and this can be different types of fidgets. And the posture, the way you stand, the way you occupy the space can also be distracting and what I call noisy. So I'm going to cover each of those 6 aspects of being a noisy presenter and moving to being a clean and concise and purposeful presenter. Noisy gestures. Noisy gestures are when your hands just bounce up and down for no reason. And one of the ones that I've illustrated there is in fact what we call the karate chop. So every time I make a point, I decide that I need to chop my hands up and down. Our Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, bounces his hands up and down in time with what he's saying, almost like he is conducting an orchestra. So with your gestures, they need to be purposeful, they need to be deliberate, they need to be frozen. So don't do the bounce up and down. Make the gesture, whatever that may be, and then just freeze it. And then move on to the next gesture. A lot of people feel that when they're moving their hands around, just because they're making a gesture, that's good nonverbal communication. The rule is if the gesture's not adding to what you're saying, not amplifying what you're saying, then really it's a superfluous or a noisy gesture. Now, if we go back to the traditional thoughts around noise, you hear people talking or a presenter speaking, and someone's mobile phone rings. Most people find that distracting, most people find that disrespectful, and it annoys and draws attention away from you, the speaker or presenter. And the mobile phone is an auditory trigger. It's an auditory noise that we hear. The bounce of the hand is what I call a visual trigger, visual noise. And for some of us who are visual learners, that bouncing of the hand, that flapping of the hands around aimlessly is in fact more distracting than the ring of the mobile phone. So what do your hands do when you're speaking? Have you got good, purposeful, meaning gestures that add to what you're saying, are nice and clean and still, and they don't flap up and down? I'll leave that with you. Worthwhile doing an audit on how you gesture. Please don't lock your hands away and think, well, I've got noisy gestures, so I need to put them away, because now you're locking away your potential to communicate by about 50%. So the gestures are important, but it's the way you gesture that matters. Use of the platform. It's good to use the platform. Standing behind the lectern for your whole presentation, your whole training, is not the strongest position to stand. So when you come out away from the platform and you stand in the middle of the room, use the platform for purpose. Move to one side of the room, settle down, re-anchor, readjust your posture so you're looking at the middle of the room again, catching everyone. Then you might spend 1 or 2 minutes there. Then you might move to another part of the room, settle down, re-anchor. Once again, recenter yourself so you're looking at everyone in the room. You might use one side of the room with a flip chart and put positive things there, or the other side of the room with a whiteboard and put negative things there. You might move forward on the platform to emphasize particular points, and then step back into the middle of the platform when you've finished emphasizing that point. The thing to avoid the noisiness of the platform is when you just walk across the stage back and forth rhythmically for no reason. We call this pacing, or cat on a hot tin roof. So when you use the platform, make sure you're not pacing. Make sure you're not just doing an idle wander. Rather, use the platform for purpose. Put some anchors in the platform, moving forward to emphasize a point, moving backwards away from the audience to deal with difficult, contentious stuff. Keep the center of the platform nice and clean for your take-home messages where you nail your messages. Use flip charts on either side or whiteboards on either side. So you can use one for a parking lot and one for your negative stuff, the other one for your positive and your key takeaway points. So avoid being a cat on the hot tin roof or just pacing the platform for no purpose. People will notice that. The other thing with the platform is what I call a bit of a waltz. So people will walk forward 3 steps, 1, 2, 3. They'll rise on their toes and then walk back 3 steps, 1, 2, 3. Not quite the foxtrot or the gypsy 2-step, but certainly a kind of a rhythmical dance, forward, back, and the rising up on the toes as they do go forward and reach their end point. Just be aware of what you're doing as you use the platform. So you might say it's safer to stand behind the lectern. I do understand that. You can hide and you can do a dance and you're now anchored and it's safe, but it's more powerful if you can get in front of the audience, away from the lectern, so there's no barriers between me and you, but then you have to watch out what you're doing on the platform. Words that don't mean anything. There's the common filler words, the you know. So what I want to talk about next is, and so then what we'll do is, and so I guess the secret to eliminating ums and other filler words is to be comfortable with silence. Silence is the pause. And we will use an to kind of segue or to maybe gather our thoughts. But if we just remain silent, it does the same thing. In fact, it makes us sound more intelligent. There are other words that I hear quite a few politicians use when presenting. And words sometimes actually don't mean much at all. And when you actually think about what they're actually saying, if they actually didn't use the word actually, they'd actually sound more intelligent actually than actually using actually. Obviously, what we need here is for a group of people to come together, and then obviously we can do some brainstorming, and obviously there's a greater chance of obviously coming out with a solution, and then obviously we then need to get together and obviously implement that strategy, obviously. Just be aware of those filler words. There's a YouTube video showing Caroline Kennedy, the daughter of JFK, who was going to stand for a Senate seat in New York. Hillary Clinton vacated her Senate seat to go and be Secretary of State under Barack Obama. And Caroline Kennedy was perceived as a really good candidate. Her first radio interview, she used 52 you-knows in a 20-30 minute live radio interview. That was the end. 50 to 55 you-knows, some of them 3 times in a row. So the Kennedys, they've always, been in the public spotlight, and it's kind of, right that, I should put my hand up and stand for, being a member of parliament. So, it was all over. People saw that and realized that the filler word was just so distracting that they could not hear the message she was saying. Do you use filler words? How many ums and ahs do you use? The occasional and ah is okay. Do you start every sentence with something like so? Okay, then let's move on. Okay, then let's move to the next section. Okay, then. Do you use any filler words? Try and avoid them. You'll sound much more confident, much more credible, and much more intelligent by being comfortable with silence and having clean language. Are there any questions at the moment? What if your mind goes blank? I use ums and ahs just to help me recover. Tony Abbott uses lots of ums and ahs. Yes, he does. And I don't think Tony Abbott is a great public speaker. And Bob Hawke used to use lots of ahs and ums as well. The thing is, when your mind goes blank, if you're comfortable with pause, with silence, 99% of the time you will recover. And what I've found is that when people say, when they announce, so they're speaking, and they announce that, oh, I've just forgotten what I was going to say. Just hang on a moment, I've just lost my train of thought. Within 1-2 seconds, they've recovered beautifully. So had they not mentioned, had they not panicked, had they not announced that they'd lost their train of thought, we, the audience, would have had no idea that they'd lost their train of thought. So this is where you need to trust yourself and have the ability to be comfortable with silence. The other thing, as a speaker, that silence is amplified 200%. So we have a pause that seems like an eternity. To the audience, all they see is, oh, Peter's paused. Another way of dealing with ums and ahs is to get someone you trust to give you a little signal every time you say an especially around a meeting, someone you trust. Maybe they can just put their finger up every time you say And this is going to annoy you. This is going to distract you. But the only way for you to stop your trusted colleague from putting their finger up is to not say So the antidote is for you as a speaker to then pause. Now, use this in a safe environment. Don't use this at a job interview or a high-stakes presentation, but something where you're comfortable and people kind of know you're working on your ums and ahs, and you've just got that little visual cue. I do it in workshops, and you see people by the third presentation during the day, and they give us permission to put our finger up. They've learnt not to say ums because the pain of being interrupted with that visual cue annoys them so much that they would rather concentrate on being silent. Thanks for those questions. PowerPoint slides can be really noisy. This would be an example of a noisy slide. It's got lots of swivels, bounces, zooms, ranges of colors. The idea is to keep your slides fairly clean so they can pop. So what do I mean by noisy PowerPoint slides? Let me tell you what noise can be. It can be having logos. You notice on this slide there is no corporate logo. Having corporate logos on every slide. Having web pages, www.peterdew.com.au, www.healthdepartmentofwa.com.au. The page numbers, page 5 of 10. Too many different colors, too much background. I went to a presentation a while back where the background of the slide had grey tools. So hammers, saws, electric drills, spoke shaves, marking gauges, planes, chisels, and I was looking for all the different types of tools I could find in the background. Keep your background clean with no distractions. Fancy fade in, so these are the ones that do boom, and without the noise, and the curtains, the blinds appear, and then of course there's the sounds that follow those fade-ins, ka-chings and boop. All of that is noise. So let me give you an example of what I mean by a clean PowerPoint slide that should pop so that people see what you're getting at straight away. So let me talk about wheat yields from 2000 to 2006 in West Australia. Just in case you're not sure what wheat looks like, that's a photo of wheat. Here's all the years. This is the tons, this is the years. This is my website, by the way, on page 9 of 75. Oh, by the way, that's a corporate logo. I'm hoping you've clearly got the image of what's the purpose of this PowerPoint slide. I'm hoping it pops for you. Probably not. Probably not. What happened in 2003? This is the same slide. This is the same data. I've removed all the unnecessary information. Picture of wheat, all the different colors. My logo's not there anymore. Now, your corporate logo, put it on your first slide and your last slide, by all means. Put your website, your phone number on your first slide, your last slide. Some corporate branding in government and bigger organizations requires logos and page numbers on every page, but you are detracting from your audience's ability to understand what's the purpose of the slide. Let me go back. Can you see that I'm really talking about 2003? Takes a while to work that out. All those superfluous colors, pink, orange, red, blue, green, yellow. Let the red pop. The other years don't matter, they're fairly standard. So we're talking about the drought of 2003. So that's what I mean by make sure your slides are not too noisy. That the message, the purpose of the PowerPoint slide is clear and comes through precisely in the way you want it. Another thing, you don't have to have your PowerPoints up all the time. So another mistake, and it's kind of noise related, is that I'm now going to talk about posture. And I'm leaving up a slide about wheat yields. See how the slide no longer represents or is aligned with what I'm saying? So you can bring the slide down, and you do that by hitting the B button, B for black. All I've done is hit the B for black. PowerPoint's still going. You're now looking at me. So now I can talk about the importance of knowing what your posture's saying about you. If I want the slide back, I just hit B. All right, moving on. Fidgeting. What do I mean by fidgeting? There's those people that go on stage and they fidget. And there's a whole range of fidgets. They play with their tie, or they keep playing with their clothing. Clothing can be pulling down your cufflinks, your sleeves, tugging on your blouse, pulling on your coat. Just that playing with your clothes. That's a common fidget. Just preening, getting everything right as you're on stage. I know you've got to get everything right before you go on stage, but don't preen and play with your clothing on stage. Fidgeting with bracelets, rings and other jewelry. So I have a watch and I have a copper bracelet. And if I play with it, my ring, my wedding ring, and I see people and they just, how can I make that so you can see it? And they just go around and around with their ring. Any jewelry that you have, be aware of it and don't play with it. My gold chain, just thought I'd play with it just a little bit. The bangles. Now some jewelry can be noisy in the fact that it makes a sound, so lots of metal bangles will jingle as you're speaking and gesturing, and men, if you have cufflinks and you do stand at a lectern, don't know if you can hear that, the scraping of cufflinks or bangles on the lectern can be distracting. Playing with pens. Let me grab a pen for you. Playing with pens. So there's all sorts of things you can do. There's the drummer that does the twirl with his drumsticks, but that's artful. When you do a twirl with your pen, that is not artful, that is distracting. And the other one is someone who stands up and clicks and clicks. This one's not clicking very well. The rule is if you don't need it, don't bring it up. So why would you bring up a pen if you don't need it? If you've got a notepad and you need to take some notes because you're facilitating, that's okay. Once you've done, just put the pens down. The other fidget that I sometimes talk about is people bring up notes. And what they do is they just keep moving the note paper around and around in their hands. Now this would be down around their waist, but if I do this around my waist, you can't see it. But it's just that fidget with the paper. Now I'm going to do it end over end, just because it's in my hands and I bring it up as a security blanket. If you don't need it, get rid of it. Twirling of reading glasses. I need glasses and the twirling. So if you need glasses to read notes, I don't need glasses to present. So when I'm presenting, I don't present without glasses and I generally don't use notes. I'm lucky because I've taught myself to learn my content and I mostly focus on stories, so I don't have a script to learn. But if you do have information that you need to read and you bring up your glasses and then you read it, fair enough, I understand that. And then you now don't want your glasses on because you're now facing the audience, put your glasses down somewhere so your hands are free to gesture and you're nice and clean. Don't just hang on to your glasses and play with them, waiting until you need to do your next bit of reading. Adjusting hair. Not really a problem for me, but a lot of people with longer hair and it gets in their eyes and they keep flicking it back over their ears. I saw someone the other day do about 50 hair flicks every 5 minutes, or every 10 minutes they had to flick their hair, just get it out of the way. just be aware that that is distracting for some of your audience. The other one would be if I had a longer moustache and I just decided to roll or twirl my moustache. That would be, once again, noise from a speaker's perspective. I mentioned the bounce of the gestures, but other people, let's say we don't have a ring, they do a pencil sharpener or they do the knuckle cracks. So any kind of gestures besides the bounce that is not adding to what you're saying can be perceived by people as noisy. All right, that's fidgeting. So make sure that you don't play with your collar, fidget with buttons, pens in your pocket, all of those things. Just be nice and clean and only do it if it adds value to what you're saying. All right, moving on. Posture. Noisy posture. Some people stand and they move with their stance too wide. So it's fair to say that this particular one here, I see a lot in mining sites, BHP, Rio Tinto, Chevron. The rule is that your stance, your gait should be no wider than your shoulders. As soon as you go wider, and I see people with even wider, this is noise. Sorry, this is aggressive. This is seen as aggressive. Standing behind the lectern and doing lectern leans, so leaning on the lectern, grabbing the lectern with white knuckle fever, you grab so hard, that is also noise. And what I call hip lock, so this person has transferred his weight on this hip, and then within a minute or so they'll transfer their weight onto the other hip and they go back and forth, leaning on one hip, leaning on the other hip. This is noise. So with your posture, stand up, shoulders up, breathing nice and deep below. Don't do that shallow breathing, which is a sign of nervousness. And find that position or that posture of excellence. I call that, find your POE. Position of excellence, posture of excellence. And move into it when you leave the lectern. Move into that position of excellence. And one way of doing that is, one tool that I use to help people is to think of, stand on your feet slightly apart where you're comfortable and then rock back and forth on your feet from the balls of your feet to your toes, just like a rocking horse. Rock back and forth and feel the different pressure points. As with a rocking horse, if you don't touch that rocking horse anymore, it'll come to rest on a position of least resistance. Once you've found that in your feet, you should be able to memorize that. So when you walk on stage, you kind of stand in that spot of least resistance, feet slightly apart, knees slightly bent. These knees here are probably a little bit locked, knees slightly bent, so you can swivel your hips, and then as you know, you move on the platform for purpose. So there's a summary of things that can make your presentation noisy, and if you eliminate the noise, you'll be more effective, more confident, and have greater impact when you present. Watch your gestures, watch your use of the platform, filler words, make your PowerPoint slides clean, people who fidget, don't do jewelry, and the posture, make it nice and clean posture. Workshops coming up in Perth, Melbourne, Broome workshops are filling up really quickly. Back in Perth the end of November. Next workshops, next webinars for those of you who are interested. 5 quick relaxes, so you get a little bit nervous before speaking. What are some quick things you can do before you go on stage? And part of it is to do with your posture. And I've had a request how to deal with hecklers. Some people have worry about when someone gives them difficult questions or annoys them. How can I get better at dealing with hecklers? So they're the 2 webinars. So just remember, even if you just focus on 2 or 3 of these things, you can eliminate your noise, be more confident, more clear, and more effective when you present to a group of people. Thank you.